I've been told that I have an overdeveloped sense of curiosity. It's the kind of curiosity that leads you to get up on your roof dressed in an Ewok costume and a hang glider and take off after watching Return of the Jedi last week. And the curiosity that I have leads me to find interesting things in what would be normally uninteresting places. And one of these uninteresting places is over on the east side of Des Moines next to the fairgrounds, where there's a tiny house that exists there. It's a normal-looking 3-bedroom ranch, and I actually discovered this little 3-bedroom ranch while out looking for garage sales. And I pulled up, and it looked like the cast party for Sons of Anarchy. I mean, Dad was sitting there sporting a fresh new eye tattoo that looked pretty smart. And Mom was negotiating about the price of her Christmas ornaments with somebody. And I made the deal right there on the front steps to buy this home. Problem was, there was a homeless guy living there at the time. We named him Les, because technically he owned my home for about 2 months, so he wasn't homeless, so we just called him Les. And we let him live there until the winter was over. I said, Les, you got to go. It's time to clean out the house. And so we decided, we finally got in the house, and it was chock full of stuff. And while we were cleaning things out, we noticed in this little side room, after we pulled all the boxes out, that there was a secret door there. Now, if Chronicles of Narnia and Lion the Witch of the Wardrobe has taught us anything, is that nothing but good can happen when you lead secret passageways to underground worlds, right? So I got to go down that place. So that's what I did. All right. Got ourselves a secret room here. Secret hallway down, secret like an old Soviet-style bomb shelter down here. Oh boy, got it set up with a well and barracks and the whole nine. The interesting thing about buying real estate is that it's kind of like going to garage sales when you try on other people's clothes, and you'll find an extra 20 in the pocket, or you might find an old locket. And these houses are representative of how people feel about the future. And they shape their living spaces kind of representative of those feelings and emotions, right? In this case, so afraid that decided to build a full-on World War II style bomb shelter in his backyard. And every day I'm finding new stuff in the pockets of this guy's house. One of which is I found a manhole cover that goes from the garage down to the basement, right? I also found these 2 protrusions coming out of the wall that you could turn left and right, and there was a double window pane that had a metal sheet that would slide in between them. So if someone broke through the outside one, you could shut them out with the metal pane, right? Crazy. The entire gutter system tied into a clay tile that ran adjacent to the bomb shelter so that he could use a combination of the hand-dug well that was inside the bomb shelter in conjunction with the rainwater to flush out all the excrement from the bomb shelter, right? Crazy. And every day was something new like that. Well, one day, I'm down near the well, and I look up, and I see like a little circular portal. It looked like an escape hatch. Now, mind you, I'm not just geeking out on this stuff because I liked what he built, but I always wanted this stuff in my house when I was a kid, right? I mean, the guy had a periscope, like full-on periscope, like, yeah, right, like Das Boot stuff. And zombie apocalypse. But, so I'm looking around, and I'm like, I don't remember seeing something in the backyard that was an escape hatch. So all of a sudden, it's my Indiana Jones moment. I'm like, oh, I knew what to do. I ran up topside, grabbed a spade, and started digging out. And then I find this right here. Oh, that was the escape hatch. And this is what I find in the backyard after I'm digging. I mean, I did the whole thing. I got out the paintbrush and was brushing it away like I was an archaeologist in the whole nine. But I was bummed because the guy had sealed it off. And I'm like, son of a gun, what do we do? Well, you know what we do.
All right, let's do this. There you go.
Oh, yeah.
You can't.
Oh, man.
Dude drummed it up.
Now, I thought he had drummed it up because he wanted to keep the water from going in the bomb shelter, but that wasn't the case. What he had really done, if you went down into the bomb shelter, is he had created a louvered system of baffles, concrete baffles on every opening that went into the bomb shelter so that he could prevent people from pouring hazardous waste down into the shelter and getting into it. Every single pipe had a louvered system on it. This is unbelievable. And I started thinking, I'm like, what was this guy so afraid of that he had to go? Because this wasn't a prefab bomb shelter, right? This was one-off. Everything was one-off and had a thought in mind behind why he built it. And I said, I got to meet this cat. But where do I find him? So I kept on looking. By the way, I'll tell you about this in a second, but there was this air duct that came up out of the ground, and I started wiping away at the base of it, and I found his name. He had inscribed it in the concrete, and this guy's name was Paulus Bredis. And I'm like, well, how many Paulus Bredes can there be in Des Moines, right? So I Googled that stuff, checked on the abstract, and I found out that he was a member of the Latvian Air Force. And he had been bombed by the Soviets when they came and occupied Latvia in 1940. Then he got bombed by the Nazis who ran out the Soviets. Then he got bombed again by the Allies. So the guy knew a little bit about being shelled, right? And he had created, even the stairway, you could tell, because it was a zigzag shape to prevent the shrapnel from flying all around and encase it. And he had 3 escape hatches in case the bombs crushed the house and crushed this one. He also had a little weak spot built into the wall that you could hit with a sledgehammer where the sand would come out and you could dig yourself out like Andy Dufresne, right? So I tracked him down. And one night I invited a bunch of buddies over for a poker game to check out the bomb shelter. And one guy says, hey, his son is actually a client of mine. I said, what are the chances? I gotta love Des Moines. Everybody knows everybody. So with the help of Iowa Public Radio, we actually tracked down the kids. We brought them over, and they filled in the gaps. And it turns out that they immigrated over with the help of a Lutheran church in 1955. And then they started the construction. Now, this isn't completely off the grid. Like, the city of Des Moines did not have this on the records. What they had done was they had built an addition onto the house, and under the cover of night while they're doing that addition, they decided to add on the bomb shelter, right? And the kids were relaying stories about how there used to be an old Safeway grocery store that they tore down, and they had all this construction debris that they brought up these mortars and these chisels, and Dad made the 2 sons create piles of this stuff to reuse it. It was all built from scratch like Johnny Cash, one piece at a time, right? And they did this for 2 years, and they had like this they hand-dug this one bucket at a time. They dug that well, and it was still in operation. 60 years later, there had not been one hairline crack in the walls. I mean, the architecture was amazing, and they said the dad had no formal education. He was a farmer in Latvia. The family themselves were actually brewmeisters and were just about to take over market share from Schlitz when the war happened. So they had to bury all their stuff on the farm, and they had a map to it that their dad had showed them when they were a kid, but it was somewhere in the house, lost to history. And the reason that it was lost to history, this is a cool overflow system for the well in case the water level got too high. And this is where the radio in the backyard of Funky Mushroom, and they had coiled copper wires so they could have shortwave radio. That's the weak spot in the well. But the reason it was lost to history is because in 1984, Paulus Bredis died. And all Paulus Bredis' ingenuity, all his inventions, and all his fears died with him. And that bomb shelter was turned into a cannery and a wine cellar in a weird swords into plowshares type of way, right? And I think about Paulus Bredis all the time, because that's when it hit me. I've got my own bomb shelter moments, right? I hear stuff about all the bad things that are going on in the news, and I have 3 kids of my own. And I think, am I going to be able to provide for them? Are we going to have the resources to sustain population growth? All the stuff that you hear on the news about that's going on, and I get afraid, just like everybody does. And I think, a little sidebar here, I read a book by a guy named Stephen Kotler called Abundance, and he talks about no matter how bad we really think things are actually getting better. We don't have to fight for our food as much anymore. The amount of time, we have free time, abundance of free time. Things actually can and are getting better. But we like to feed the fear part of our brain. And it's paralyzing if we let it take over. And Paulus had really good reason for letting that fear part of his brain take over, right? It wasn't unfounded. He really had fear part. But I wonder about Paulus. I wonder, what would it have looked like in Des Moines if a guy as bright as Paulus had his inventions topside? His ingenuity was above ground rather than buried underground in Des Moines on the east side over near the fairgrounds. And that's what sticks with me. And when I think about Paulus, and I'd get afraid myself, I try to remember Paulus, and I try to say, I don't want to build a monument to fear. I want to be part of the solution and the evolution that leads Des Moines from a city 1.0 to a 2.0. Sometimes it's crazy ideas, sometimes it's sane ones, but that's what the lesson I've learned from Paulus Bredis. Thanks for having me.